Between blood ties and limits. How I learned to protect my life amidst family chaos. I never imagined that a simple Sunday afternoon could become a turning point in my life. I was sitting on my porch, sipping coffee and listening to music, when my phone vibrated with an unexpected message. It was from my mother, but the content felt like a bomb about to explode. I didn't know at that moment that that message would forever change my perception of family, trust, and boundaries. Before that, my life seemed balanced, even with the ups and downs common to any young adult. I had my plans, my routine, and a self-earned sense of independence. Nothing seemed capable of shaking me until the words appeared before me, raw, cutting, and challenging, announcing that my father had another daughter, a half-sister I had never imagined existed. My name is Samara, and I was 24 years old at the time of this discovery. I worked in a demanding job, but at the same time gave me autonomy, something I've always strived for. My routine was busy but organized. Studies, work, friends, and leisure time were well distributed. My relationship with my father, Fernando, was relatively good, despite the small disagreements that always existed. My brother Samuel was finishing college, and my life, though busy, had a predictable, secure rhythm, and I felt comfortable with that. I never imagined that a single piece of news could so shake the structure I considered solid, making me question everything. My family relationships, my principles, and my own ability to deal with unexpected crises. The news about my half-sister, Lilian, came accompanied by Vivian, her mother. They showed up at my door unexpectedly, as if they had every right to invade my life without asking permission. It was an immediate shock. I felt a mixture of anger, disbelief, and confusion. My father, Fernando, seemed hesitant, torn between guilt and the need to make amends, but unaware that he was placing me at the center of a situation I hadn't asked for. I found myself at a crossroads. Should I welcome someone who was technically part of my family, but who hadn't made any effort to get to know me or respect the boundaries of my home? And moreover, how should I deal with Vivian's presence, manipulative and insistent, who seemed to believe I should take on responsibilities that weren't mine? At that moment, my life became a whirlwind. I felt like all my efforts to build independence and emotional security were threatened. My home, once my refuge, now felt like an arena of constant pressure. Every interaction with my father or Samuel became tense, as family loyalty conflicted with the need to establish clear boundaries. Paula, Samuel's girlfriend, also entered the equation, pregnant and insecure, fearing the emotional chaos surrounding the family. The pressure multiplied, and I found myself questioning my own ability to handle conflict, maintain my sanity, and protect my emotional space. What bothered me most was realizing that, even in the face of this whole situation, Lilian was also a victim. She grew up unaware of her father's existence, depending on Vivian for everything. It was impossible to see everything in black and white. I was angry, but I also felt empathy. Diane, my best friend, was the balance that allowed me to begin to organize my thoughts and emotions. She reminded me that I didn't need to take on responsibilities that weren't mine, and that setting boundaries didn't mean being cruel, but rather taking care of myself. This first encounter with family tension was painful, but it also marked the beginning of a process of self-discovery, emotional strength, and assertiveness that I didn't yet know I was capable of developing. In the days following Lilian and Vivian's arrival, I realized that living together wouldn't be easy. Every conversation seemed fraught with ulterior motives. Every gesture, however small, turned into a test of loyalty or manipulation. Fernando, my father, tried to redeem himself, but often misguidedly, pressuring me to open my home and my life to Lilian, disregarding my resistance. Samuel, my brother, felt torn, oscillating between his affection for me and the obligation to be kind to his new stepsister. Tension built up over dinners, texts, and casual encounters, and with each passing moment, I felt my emotional space being subtly but painfully invaded. My patience and emotional balance were being tested in ways I never imagined, and I began to realize that maintaining my own well-being would be a daily challenge, requiring strength and clear boundaries. Meanwhile, Paula was facing her own battle. Her pregnancy left her vulnerable, and the family chaos made her insecure, fearing the impact of the tensions on the unborn child. I found myself torn between supporting my brother, respecting his girlfriend's feelings, and simultaneously protecting my own emotional stability. Every decision seemed impossible, and I felt the weight of having to carry responsibilities that weren't mine. while still dealing with my own uncertainties and emotions. It was at that moment that I realized that the real challenge wasn't just dealing with others, but understanding myself, my limits, and the need to maintain my emotional integrity amidst a family that seemed to expect me to be the mediator. Diane became an unconditional support, always there to listen, advise, and, most importantly, remind me that I had the right to say no. Her friendship was the anchor that kept me balanced, preventing the weight of family demands from sinking me. With her, I began practicing assertiveness, expressing my feelings without guilt, setting boundaries, and accepting that it wasn't my responsibility to fix adults' mistakes. Each small victory in this process, like declining invitations that made me uncomfortable or establishing clear rules of coexistence, brought a sense of empowerment and control over my own life, even though I still felt guilt and fear of others' judgment. The situation reached a critical point when Vivian began to emotionally manipulate Samuel, suggesting that if he didn't help Lilian, he would be failing as a brother and son. The pressure mounted, and I felt like I was at the epicenter of a storm. It was difficult to remain calm, especially when I realized that my father, even unintentionally, was reinforcing this pressure. The anger and frustration I felt wasn't just against them, but also against myself, feeling guilty for not wanting to open up about my life so immediately and completely. It was a period of intense introspection, of confronting my deepest emotions and questioning how much I should give in or fight for my space. Amidst all this, I began to notice small changes in myself. Every challenge, every conflict, every emotional blackmail became an opportunity to strengthen my resilience. I began to identify patterns of manipulation, understand my own reactions, and develop strategies to maintain my peace. It was painful to recognize that my family could be toxic and that I needed to protect myself, but it was also liberating to realize that I didn't have to carry the blame for all the problems. This initial learning was crucial for me to begin charting my path to overcoming, realizing that true strength comes from clarity about who we are, what we accept, and what we are unwilling to tolerate. There was a day when I felt utterly exhausted. All the arguments, demands, and manipulations seemed to have drained my energy, and I actually considered giving up. Sitting alone in my room, staring at the ceiling, I wondered if it was worth it to continue trying to deal with a family that constantly tested my limits. My body and mind were on high alert, my patience was exhausted, and the feeling of loneliness was overwhelming. It was at that moment that I realized how I had neglected my own need to take care of myself. I couldn't continue sacrificing myself emotionally for people who didn't respect my autonomy. The urge to give up everything was strong, but something inside me told me I had to resist, that there was still a way out that didn't involve giving up my life or my sanity. The turning point came from a heart-to-heart conversation with Diane. She helped me see that the responsibility wasn't mine, that I could set boundaries without guilt, and that my priority needed to be my emotional health and safety. I recalled times when I had overcome challenges before, even when it seemed impossible, and realized this situation was no different. I began to visualize practical strategies to protect my space, setting clear visiting hours, having firm conversations with my father about respecting my boundaries, and, most importantly, realizing that my empathy for Lilian didn't mean accepting everything imposed on me. That conversation was a turning point. I realized I could weather the storm with courage, organization, and the awareness that taking care of myself wasn't selfishness, but emotional survival. In the following days, I began to put my decisions into practice. Each difficult conversation, each firmly said no, was an exercise in assertiveness and self-confidence. My brother Samuel began to understand that by respecting me, he was also preserving the peace of his own life. Paula, still insecure, found security in realizing that there were clear boundaries that protected everyone involved. I realized that although Lilian was the product of a complicated situation, I didn't need to take on responsibilities that weren't mine. At the same time, I maintained empathy and a willingness to establish a gradual relationship without allowing myself to be manipulated. This balance was painful but liberating, and marked the beginning of a transformation that went beyond mere emotional survival. Overcoming it didn't happen overnight. There were setbacks, days when I felt insecure, and moments when anger and frustration overwhelmed me. But the difference was that now I was aware of my worth, of my right to protect my life and my choices. Every challenge, even the smallest, was an opportunity to reaffirm my inner strength. I learned to trust my feelings, not to give in to pressure from Vivian or my father, and to understand that setting boundaries is in fact an act of courage and self-love. It was an ongoing process, made up of small steps, silent victories, and important discoveries. About myself. Looking back today, I can see how this period shaped who I am. I learned that empathy and firmness can coexist, that love doesn't mean giving up on yourself, and that resilience is built in everyday life, not in grand gestures. My family situation isn't completely resolved yet, and not everything is perfect, but I discovered that I can live healthily, even in the face of complicated relationships. This learning became my foundation, the ability to protect my emotional space, take care of my sanity, and establish healthy relationships without guilt or fear. The sense of freedom that comes from knowing your limits and knowing how to apply them is invaluable. And this experience taught me that overcoming complex emotional challenges is possible when you maintain clarity, courage, and self-love. As the days passed, I realized that true overcoming wasn't just about saying no or maintaining boundaries, but about understanding my own emotions and learning to manage them healthily. Each confrontation with Vivian or Lilian became an exercise in patience, self-control, and conscious empathy. I began to reflect on how my feelings of anger and frustration could be converted into motivation to establish more balanced and healthy relationships. The realization that I didn't need to solve all the family problems, nor carry blame that wasn't mine, was liberating. I began documenting my emotions, writing about them, and developing strategies to act with clarity, without being dominated by impulse or external pressure. This process was silent but powerful, as it allowed me to recognize my strength and ability to make decisions that prioritized my well-being. At the same time, I gradually grew closer to Lilian, realizing that she also harbored insecurities, fears, and resentments caused by a life marked by absences and misdirected expectations. Instead of trying to fix everything, I began to listen to her, understand her pain, and realize that our relationship could be built gradually, without impositions. This understanding brought significant emotional relief, as it allowed me to remain firm without losing my humanity. I realized that empathy doesn't mean relinquishing boundaries, but rather understanding the other without allowing unnecessary intrusions. This balance became central to my journey of overcoming, reinforcing that true strength lies not in imposition, but in the conscious management of emotions and the preservation of one's own integrity. Samuel, my brother, began to realize the importance of the emotional balance I was striving to establish. He saw that by respecting my boundaries, everyone around me, including Lilian and Paula, could coexist more healthily. This realization brought about a new family dynamic: less confrontation, more dialogue, and understanding. Paula, in turn, found security in our example, feeling that she didn't need to give in to emotional pressure to preserve her own peace, and that of the baby. It was at this point that I began to feel that my efforts to maintain clear boundaries were truly generating concrete changes in family life. My sense of competence and assertiveness grew, and I realized that I was rebuilding not only my own life, but also positively influencing the environment around me. Each challenge that arose was then an opportunity to reaffirm my choices. I learned to deal with emotional blackmail without feeling guilty, to clearly communicate my feelings without aggression, and to protect my space without fear. I discovered that it is possible to be empathetic and firm at the same time, and that respecting one's own limits is essential for healthy relationships. Gradually, my home once again became a safe space where I could breathe, reflect, and act according to my principles. The transformation was subtle but profound. I began to feel more in control of my emotional life and less vulnerable to external manipulation. This change became my greatest triumph, a silent victory that strengthened my self-esteem and confidence. Over time, I learned that overcoming doesn't mean erasing pain or ignoring problems, but rather choosing how we react to them. Each difficult interaction with my father, Samuel, Lilian, or Vivian became an opportunity to reinforce my boundaries and reaffirm my autonomy. I realized that I didn't need to approve of everything or please everyone to maintain family relationships, and that my emotional well-being took priority. This shift in perspective was liberating and allowed me to see my own strength, something I previously underestimated. I discovered that it is possible to live with conflict without allowing it to destroy your life or your inner peace. I also learned that empathy isn't synonymous with submission. Lilian, despite being the result of betrayal, needed understanding, and I could offer support without sacrificing my own needs. This delicate balance was one of the greatest challenges of my journey, but also its greatest achievement. Our coexistence became less conflictual as each of us began to understand and respect the other's limits. The initial tension, which seemed unbearable, gave way to more honest dialogues, less fraught with emotional manipulation. This change demonstrated that overcoming grief involves both the inner and the outer, understanding your feelings and creating safe spaces. The relationship with Samuel and Paula also evolved significantly. They realized that supporting each other and maintaining clear boundaries strengthens bonds rather than destroying them. The emotional security we created within our small family network became a fundamental pillar, especially for Paula, who felt vulnerable under the pressure of the situation. My experience taught me that it's possible to build an emotional safety net without giving up who we are, and that it's possible to maintain healthy relationships even in difficult situations. This realization brought a sense of balance and confidence I hadn't felt before. Ultimately, I realized that true transformation lies in the ability to remain steadfast in the face of adversity, while also understanding that each person faces their own pain. I learned to value my emotional achievements, protect my space, and establish healthy relationships, even amidst family chaos. Today, I can share my story with others, hoping it inspires courage, resilience, and self-awareness. Overcoming complex family challenges is possible, but it requires courage, patience, and the certainty that our emotional well-being is a priority. Each step along this path has shown me that despite pain and difficulties, it is possible to rebuild one's life and find peace even amidst family storms.